Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Flerf A. This episode will also be in English, and for my Hebrew speaking followers, I'll add subtitles. This time I received a good friend's recommendation on a flat earth channel called Stinky Cash, and this guy applies to all of the definitions of a common flerf. For the first video with this channel, I decided to go for something relatively general, that as far as my understanding about the philosophy of the flat earth, turns out that all flat earthers also think that way. And that's a topic we haven't touched in the previous 27 episodes, so without further ado, let's get started.
A few days ago I released a video that got a lot of attention, it got a lot of views. And in this video I pointed out that with the heliocentric model, if the Earth spun 360 degrees every 24 hours, that day and night would gradually shift and flip every 6 months as the Earth gets to the other side of the sun. Noon would become nighttime and midnight would become daytime. This is a fact. And the experts don't deny that this phenomenon would happen if the Earth spun 360 degrees every 24 hours.
That's true. This is why there is a difference between a solar day, that is the time it takes for the sun to return to the same horizontal angle it was yesterday, and a sidereal day, that is the time it takes for Earth to complete one rotation around its axis. That is, for a particular star to return to the same location it was yesterday. Between these two definitions, there are about 3 minutes and 56 seconds per day.
But what they claim is that the Earth spins 361 degrees every 24 hours. And that the Earth only spins 360 degrees in 23 hours, 56 minutes, and 4 seconds. This extra 1 degree of spin every day makes up for the roughly 1 degree of orbit, keeping noon facing the sun at all times, preventing the day-night switch that I explained in my last video from happening.
And why it's so hard for you to realize that there are two different definitions for the term day, one depending on the rotation of the Earth around its axis, and one depending on the movement of the Earth around the Sun. Draw it for yourself, it's really not that complicated. For those who did not understand what I'm talking about, a picture is currently on the screen.
Now this official explanation makes sense, and the logic is all sound, but there's still one gaping hole with this model. And that's the fact that Polaris never moves. Polaris is located over the North Pole every single day of the year, which means the North Pole points to Polaris in December, and the North Pole points to Polaris in June.
Not really, it's the other way around. It's not that the geographic North Pole points to the North Star Polaris, but that Polaris is the visible star that's closest to the point the North Pole points to. The accurate term is North Celestial Pole.
Every day of the year, the North Pole will point to Polaris. And the major problem with this is the North Pole in June and the North Pole in December are separated by roughly 186 million miles, as they are on opposite sides of the sun. So if the Earth is tilted 23.5 degrees in December and the Earth is tilted 23.5 degrees in June, and these two poles are separated by 186 million miles, how do they both point to the same star?
Maybe because the North Star is about 390 light years away. That's 24,614,928 times the distance between Earth and the Sun. By comparison, and on an accurate scale, if you look at the Moon at a certain point, then step aside 101.3 feet at a straight line and look at the Moon again. Has it visibly changed position?
This is essentially claiming that the North Pole in June, the North Pole in December, and Polaris form a triangle. But triangles can't have two parallel lines. Their explanation for a lack of a stellar parallax with Polaris is that Polaris is really far away. In fact, Polaris is over 2.55 quadrillion miles away. It's so far away that there's absolutely no detectable parallax between the Earth in June and the Earth in December.
Why are flat earthers so excited about large numbers? The universe is humongous, and stellar distances are measured in light years, not in miles. The distance from Earth to the Moon is 1.25 light seconds. The distance to the Sun is about 8 light minutes and 19 light seconds, and so on. The fact that you talk about big numbers like it impresses someone says something mainly about your cognitive abilities.
Which is separated by 186 million miles. Everything with this model has been reverse engineered from the truth. The ultimate goal from the beginning was to place the sun at the center of the universe. They want the sun at the center, as they are sun worshippers. Heliocentrism is simply modern-day sun worship masquerading as a science.
This is an interesting claim, so let's get over it for a moment. From heliocentric point of view, the sun is the center of our solar system, but not the center of the universe. It's a very modest star in stellar standards, and also obeys all of the laws of gravitational attraction, and even more accurately in Einstein's theory of general relativity. In summary, there is nothing special about the sun. But for the flat earthers, the sun may be small and local, but besides all that, it does all kinds of weird things. For example, shines locally, goes up and down, and also expands and retracts its orbit to make seasons happen. It does not obey any physical or mathematical law, and some other examples I don't remember right now.
So their goal from the beginning was to put the sun at the center. So how do you do this? Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to make the sun much larger than the Earth. For the Earth to orbit the sun's going to have to be much larger than the Earth. So they made the sun over 1 million times larger than the Earth.
That's a total lie, and definition is very vague. Larger in which category? Diameter, surface area, mass? The radius of the sun is 109 times greater than that of the Earth, and accordingly, this is where the geometric dimensions derived from. The surface area is 11,880 times, and the volume is 1,295,000 times. To say that the sun is more than 1,000,000 times, but not to mention in which metric, is a very nasty thing to do.
But when I stand on Earth and I look at the sun, it looks no bigger than a quarter. So if the sun is over 1,000,000 times larger than the Earth, how come I observe it no bigger than a quarter? So how do you explain this? Oh, well, that's because the sun is really far away. So since we had to make the sun really big to place the sun at the center, now we have to make the sun really far away. So let's make the sun 93 million miles away.
What you and other Flerfs don't understand is that this is not what you need to do to clog the holes in the heliocentric model, but these are the only conclusions to be drawn from the observation and experiments made in the last 3,000 years. That is, we know that things are getting smaller in direct proportion to their distance from the viewer, so either the sun is small and local, or it's huge and distant. The scientists checked, and by the way, I also checked, link is in the description, and concluded that under no circumstances can the sun be small and local, so what remains is that the sun is huge and far away. Now it remains to be seen exactly how much far away.
But now we've dug ourselves into a deep hole, because now we've made the diameter of the Earth's orbit around the sun roughly 186 million miles wide. And Polaris never moves. The North Pole in June is separated from the North Pole in December by roughly 186 million miles, and yet both poles point to Polaris. So how do we account for this? Oh, well, we're just going to have to make Polaris really far away to account for the fact that we see no observable parallax from June to December. So the only way to rationalize away this is to make Polaris over 2.55 quadrillion miles away.
And again, you're wrong and switch between cause and effect. Polaris was not moved to that distance to explain why there is no parallax, but it was the only conclusion that Polaris could not be local on a 100 to 3,000 miles high quote-unquote firmament, depending on a different version of the flat model, because then it had to be seen completely different from what you actually see on a different latitude. For that matter, if Polaris is 3,000 miles high, just above the center of the disk, then for it to touch the horizon, the viewer needs to be about 21.5 million miles away from the center. but as far as I know, the distance in which Polaris vanishes is about 6,200 miles altogether. So yes, this is why the flat model has been thrown in the dustbin of history, and that says a lot about flat earthers that are rummaging in those dustbins.
But I ask you, if Polaris is over 2.55 quadrillion miles away, how come I can see it? Oh, well, that's because Polaris is really freaking big. Polaris is 46 times the size of the Sun.
Another mistake. Polaris is about 37 times larger than the Sun, but size is not the only measure, but also brightness, meaning the amount of light it emits. An illuminating object can be noticed from a much greater distance than a similar dark object. By the way, this is why car lights need to be turned on during the winter.
And the Sun is over 1 million times the size of the Earth. Every explanation has to be reverse engineered because they started with an ultimate goal of placing the Sun at the center. Every other fact that they create is reverse engineered to make this work. It's just like George Orwell said in his book 1984. The stars can be near or distant according as we need them. Do you think it's beyond our mathematicians to create a dual system of astronomy? This is exactly what happened in reality. All these men that we learned about who created the heliocentric model, they had to work collectively over the span of 2,000 years to reverse engineer this model. This model comes from man. This model is built on perfected mathematics that has no relation to reality, no relation to the truth. It's simply a reverse engineered masterpiece.
Out of everything you scribbled in the last minutes, only one thing is true, and that's that the model is man-made. It describes reality as it is, including the distances and sizes, but the model, as a model, is certainly man-made. And that's for today, friends. Hopefully today we have seen exactly what's the main problem of Flerfs, that is, apart from the mental disorder they have. They can't accept that scientists accept that there can be mistakes, and we don't know everything. And it's true that they once thought that the Earth was flat, but then realized that it was not possible for some of the reasons I mentioned in this and the previous videos. And for at least 2,500 years, the world is scientifically advancing. Flat earthers just try to do the exact same reverse engineering of the heliocentric model with a bunch of ad hoc excuses and statements like we don't know and we can't know what it is. Feel free to like, subscribe and share. I was, as always, rndthinker, and see you in the next video.
Mad world, mad world.